ATAF Women in Tax Network brings together women from across the continent. That is, women in tax administrations, revenue, in ministries of finance, academia, private sector, civil society, and it brings a network of these women who have experience, those without experience, into the network where they can share their experiences and grow in terms of developing their knowledge on tax. So why the Women in Tax Network was created was to look at the gender inequality in the way we are developing tax policies. So ATAF did a research in 2022, and what we found is that just 2 countries out of the 16 countries that we assessed have legislated a gendered approach to the development of tax policy. South Africa is one of those countries. As early as during the CATS Commission in the end of 1994, they had legislated a gendered approach, mainstreaming gender into their tax policy. You've also seen in recent years that South Africa, for example, had zero rated on certain products like menstrual products. And so there has been some strides in terms of addressing gender equality. But there are 2 things that this conference looked at. It looked at on the one hand, tax policy, but on the other hand, leadership. And what you find is that there are for example, at this conference today, we heard a number of stats that was, from various studies. For example, 28% of women are on average that are represented in parliaments. 14% of corporate entities have female leadership. But we also saw that in some tax administrations, there are a large number of women. For example, 40% of the women make up the workforce in some of them, in some tax administrations. But there are still very few women that are in leadership positions. For example, across ATAF member countries, that is 42 countries in the continent, we have only 5 commissioner generals that are women. These some of the other things that came out of the study is that, you don't have the collection of gender disaggregated data, and that's something that we need to look at. So, and that's something that the network needs to ensure that, we start collecting that type of data. So using the Africa Tax Outlook, which is a flagship publication of ATAF, we have started in 2022 to collect some of this data, and we will be then increasing that in different tax headlines as well. So I think that that in terms of bringing all of this together, what we have, the Women in Tax Network is only will be 2 years old next month in March. And but in this short time, we've also introduced a mentorship program. And the mentorship program brings experienced with less experienced women together. We had 20 women that participated in 2022. And what we found is that, it was, even though some of them may not have been from the same, areas. For example, we matched people with from tax administrations with someone from private sector, etc. And they both learned from the experience, which was really good. So we think that we need to do more of that, because we need to have more women sitting around the table to influence the development of tax policy. Recently, Zambia has put a program together to mainstream gender into their tax policy development, into their tax administration, as well as into their budgeting process. So these are the types of initiatives that we need to see more of. But in order to do that, we also realize we need to do more analysis of what exists and to find the gap, and then address the gap by developing what should be a framework for the development of tax policy.
I just want to understand if you could just take us through some of your findings in terms of the role of tax policy and leadership in addressing gender inequality in Africa. You spoke about that there seems to be a vast staff complement of women at tax administrations, but in terms of the core technical roles, women are somewhat missing in that. What will it change to have better representativity in those roles?
So I think it starts all by education and with training. So when you do your recruitment process, I think you need to ensure that the women that are brought into the administrations are being trained in the core tax areas. And by training them and also having mentorship programs where they can, become more experienced in the fields, in the different fields, I think in that way you would be able to develop technical experienced women in tax administrations and in tax policy as well. The one thing is that, we need to ensure that women that are coming into the tax administrations, that they are given the chance to be part of decision making, and that is where things like mentorship programs play a key role.
So just finally, the progress that's been made and what still has to be done, particularly in South Africa.
So look, ATAF has 42 members and South Africa is one of the members. So from the conference, I think what we found is that, you've seen over the years from an explicit gender bias perspective that there has been a non-combination of household income where women's salary is not combined with the man's salary to create a higher threshold, which brings therefore more tax to be paid. You've also seen, the ownership of immovable assets that can be registered to women. These are some of the things that came out at the conference. But from an implicit tax policy perspective, there still is a lot of challenges. And one of those is taxes on pink tax. For example, the African Development Bank made a challenge today and challenged countries that were present, to zero rate menstrual products. Not all countries have that, which South Africa does. The other thing that was very interesting that came out of the conference was that, if we continue in the current rate, from an African Development Bank research, it was found that if we continue in this rate, we will only see gender equality in 100 years. So we need to start looking at these policies. One of the other policies that is important for us to look at is consumption taxes, such as VAT. But there is also the informal sector, where in Africa, there are many, the informal sector is largely made up of women. But we need to look at how we can develop policy to address the informal sector without disadvantaging those women.